Okay, I think Raj, we should be good to
Yes, sir.
go. We are about a minute away
Yes, sir.
from starting, and I think now most people have got their internet back online. Ambassador, sir, I think your camera is, yeah, okay, it
Yes.
is. So, okay, I think we are good to go. A lot of people have joined in. Raj, I think you should take over,
Yes,
please.
sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. On behalf of School of International Cooperation, Security and Strategic Languages, Rashtriya Raksha University, I would like to welcome you all to the school's flagship lecture series called Lawab Confab on National Security. I would like to request our school director, sir, Dr. L. Venkateshwaran, to give a background of the event that we are doing actually.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us. I think the audience, by and large, has been consistent ever since we started this flagship lecture series. And as my colleague Raj mentioned, we decided to call this the Lawad Confab on National Security. Lawad, because for the benefit of those who are joining us for the first time, especially from outside the university, Lawad is the place where the university is located. We began this flagship lecture series. In fact, this was an initiative that was proposed by our Vice Chancellor, Professor Bimal N. Patel. And we began this in October 2021. And in the last 14 months, this is the 25th talk of the series, as some of you would have noticed from the emails that we have circulated. The of this flagship lecture series of our school is to address issues that are relevant to the major focus areas of our school. Broadly, the School of International Cooperation, Security and Strategic Languages focuses on international relations, more specifically on the external dimensions of internal security threats or challenges that the country faces. We also focus on political economy, which is an extremely pertinent matter when it comes to influencing our national security goals. And we enmesh this focus with providing or strengthening proficiency in key strategic languages, both foreign and Indian. At the moment, we are providing French, we are providing Chinese, we are providing Arabic, Russian, as well as Persian languages for both in-service personnel as well as our other students who joined us and who will go on to become the next generation subject matter experts. The lecture series that we are doing endeavors to bring eminent personalities like Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava today, who have been in the policy world within the government for a number of years. Ambassador Srivastava served in Iran at a time when we were very closely involved with the Chabahar port. At the same time, we are also looking forward to bringing in opinion influencers from the wider strategic community so that varied perspectives can be provided, thereby adding to whatever is existing already, the existing discourse on the subject. The lecture series will also act as a platform for our own students as well as students from outside the university who will join us from different areas of specialization. And in the audience today, we have a number of students who joined us from not only within RRU, but also outside. We'd like them to use this platform to interact with one another, thereby enabling a multidisciplinary inquiry into research, both at the university as well as around the country. Among our speakers, we've been extremely blessed to have very good distinguished practitioners serving at the highest levels of government, including our current Finance Secretary, Dr. Somnathan, the current Sri Lankan Ambassador, Milinda Moragoda, until recently the Additional Secretary at the Ministry of Commerce, who used to handle our trade matters with China, Sanjay Cheddaji, NSAB member as well as the Director General for the China Center for Contemporary Studies within the Ministry of External Affairs, General Narsimhan. We've had the advisor to the Defense Secretary, General Vinod Khandare, join us. We've had the former Deputy National Security Advisor, Ambassador Pankaj Saran, join us. So there's been a slew of excellent speakers that has benefited us. And at some point of time, we are deliberating about bringing out an edited volume of some of the deliberations that have taken place within the Lawat Confab, obviously with the permissions of all the speakers. Today, of course, we are once again back, and before Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava is introduced, the topic is an extremely pertinent one. And although we are focusing on the other side of Kashmir, because Ambassador Srivastava has brought out an excellent book, which I believe is also available in our library here because we had ordered it a few weeks back. And the Jammu and Kashmir issues, as all of you will agree and acknowledge, is at the core of our bilateral relationship with Pakistan. It has been listed on the UN agenda all through, but no focused discussions on the issue has taken place since the 1970s. So, in that context, and especially in the context of what's happened post August 2019, I think this will be a very interesting talk, and I look forward to listening to Ambassador Srivastava. And I hand over to Raj now. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you so much, sir. As sir mentioned briefly, it is our immense pleasure to have Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava, sir, to deliver the 25th talk of the Lawat Confab on Forgotten Kashmir, POK, and Gilgit, Baltistan. Currently, Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava is working as a distinguished fellow at Vivekananda International Foundation, and he was the Indian ambassador to the Islamic Republic of Iran from 2011 to 2015, as mentioned by Director Sir. Ambassador Srivastava has dealt with Kashmir, Kargil, and Pokhran 2 nuclear test as Director and General Secretary in the UNP division of MEA. He also drafted Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. He has been a member of Joint Working Group on Counterterrorism with the US, European Union, Russia, Canada, and UK. He was a member of Indian delegation to the United Nations, World Conference on Human Rights, and International Court of Justice. He has served in Karachi and has authored the book Forgotten Kashmir, The Other Side of the Line of Control, published by HarperCollins. He has also served on the board of directors of GAIL and India Ports Global Limited for development of Chabahar Port, as mentioned by Director Sir. He also negotiated the MOU for Indian participation in the Chabahar Port as Indian ambassador to Iran. We heartily welcome you, sir. And now I would like to request Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava, sir, to deliver the lecture. Thank you so much, sir.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be with the students and faculty of the Rashtriya Raksha University and be part of this Lawat conference. And my thanks for a very generous introduction. I would, before I start my lecture, let me show you the map. Map, please. Let me explain why I chose this topic. I dealt with Kashmir issue for 8 years in Ministry of External Affairs. And I found that, we were on the defensive for all the wrong reasons. We provided democracy and development to our part of the Kashmir, but because of the transparency, the focus was only on our part. And what Pakistan had done to people, Kashmiris on its side of the line of control, was not known to the international community. And this book which I have written and my presentation today is based on primary sources on the works of the major actors. And let me just mention one or two. Colonel Akbar Khan, he was a serving officer of the Pakistani army who led the tribal invasion. And he has left an account of his adventures. It's called Raiders in Kashmir, and the title itself tells you what the war was about. It was certainly not an indigenous struggle. The second source which I have quoted often is Muhammad Sarraf. Muhammad Sarraf was a Muslim conference activist. There was National Conference, which was the main political party on the Indian side, headed by Sheikh Abdullah. And the other side, there was Muslim Conference, which advocated accession to Pakistan. Sarraf played a very major role. People, it's forgotten that Muslim Conference working committee had actually asked for an independent Kashmir under the Maharaja. And it was Sarraf who got this recommendation reversed next day in the general body meeting of the Muslim conference in favor of Pakistan. So he's played a very major role in Pakistan's favor, and therefore, his account of what happened thereafter cannot be disputed even by Pakistanis. Now, let's have a look at this map, and you see there's this bulge on northwest corner. This is purple color, and on top there's it's marked POK. Now, this part, the northwest bulge. This was called originally Northern Area, and you see a thin sliver of territory which extends north-south. It's like the lion's paws. That thin sliver of territory is what Pakistanis call Azad Kashmir and what we call POK. Now, there's a discrepancy in the two descriptions. What we call POK includes Northern Area. What they call Azad Kashmir is only that thin sliver of territory at the, it's the purple strip, which is simply just 15% of the total territory under Pakistan's control. So it's only a rump. The major part, the northern area, which is called Gilgit Baltistan, was absorbed by Pakistan right in the beginning in 1947. Recently you would have followed the debate on deletion of Article 370 and discussions of the Kashmir issue on the Indian side. There is this criticism of the partition of the state into union territories. Pakistan had done this within 3 weeks. It took over the territory and it separated northern area and took it under direct control. Now, what is the importance of the northern area? Without northern area, there would have been no CPEC. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, as it is called, enters China through the northern areas. Indus River, which is the major source of water for Pakistan, again enters Pakistan through the northern area. And if we had not lost control of the northern area, India would have had geographical contiguity with Afghanistan. You can see that thin strip on top of on the crest of Jammu and Kashmir. It's written Afghanistan. This is a strip of territory called Wakhan Corridor, which was a buffer devised by the British in the 19th century to protect their Indian colonial position from the advancing empire of the advancing Russian Empire. So northern area was strategically most important part of the state. We lost it. Now there is a view, and this view is that northern area was ceded by people by leaders of Azad Kashmir or POK in an agreement called Karachi Agreement of 1949. There were 3 signatories to this so-called Karachi Agreement. It was signed on behalf of Pakistan by Nawab Gurmani, the Pakistani Minister for Kashmir Affairs. On behalf of the Azad Kashmir, it was supposed to have been signed, mark my words, it was supposed to have been signed by the president of POK, Sardar Ibrahim, and the chairman of the Muslim Conference, Ghulam Abbas. Now, this agreement, under which these 2 Kashmiri leaders allegedly ceded the territory, which is 85% of the territory under Pakistan's control, for direct administration by Pakistan in 49. This agreement was kept secret. Why was it kept secret? Because Pakistan had changed the territorial status quo of Kashmir without plebiscite. They have been accusing India that, India has violated UN Security Council resolutions. They did this in 1949. And because this was a violation, and they knew that this was a violation, so it was kept secret from the United Nations, from India, and even from the people of Azad Kashmir or POK. Now, this agreement came to light in a historic judgment of POK High Court in 1993. And this case was, filed by all the political parties of POK, including Muslim League, POK, People's Party, POK, all the political parties had together filed this case against Pakistan government. And they asked for return of northern area. And the POK High Court, in its historic judgment, said that separation of northern area by Pakistan from POK was a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. In so many words, I'm quoting verbatim. Now, this was a huge embarrassment to Pakistan government. And of course, they got the judgment reversed by going to the POK Supreme Court, which reversed it on procedural grounds. It had no substantive answer. The procedural ground was that the POK High Court was a creation of POK Constitution, and POK Constitution did not define the territory, which is very funny. So how could the creation, the High Court itself challenge the basis on which it was founded? This was only a very spacious procedural argument. They had no substantive arguments to give. But this was an admission that they had violated UN Security Council resolutions. Now, there are two caveats to this narrative. I call it, versions of truth. Pakistan has many versions of truth. I remember there's an American movie in the 90s, and one of my favorite American actor, he's caught by his second wife flirting with his third girlfriend. Now, when the second wife confronts him, this fellow uses a very delicate phrase. He denies what she was saying, and he uses a delicate phrase. He says that, there are versions of truth. And this wife retorts, truth has no versions, there's only one truth. But Pakistan has versions of truth. So Karachi Agreement, which they had kept under the wrap for more than 3 decades, is also part of versions of truth. Why I call it versions of truth? Because the truth was that it was not in 1949 that Pakistan took over this huge area. They took it over in 1947 itself. The war, the tribal invasion began sometime in late September. Officially, the Pakistan gives the date 20th October 47. 26th October, the state of Jammu and Kashmir under Maharaja Hari Singh acceded to India, and next day, India rushed the armed troops. Now, most of the fighting in this area was confined to the lower western reaches. You can see on the map from Kupwara to down to Baramulla, and then Punch and Rajouri. So facing that is the area which is now called by Pakistan Azad Kashmir. Now, most of the fighting was in this area. Northern area was very inhabitable. Pakistan certainly had no resources to reach there, and Indian Army also, it took some time before they could break through to that area, or they could reach, on the eastern side in Ladakh. So here in Gilgit, on 1st November 1947, Major Brown, an officer of the Gilgit Scouts was a paramilitary force of Maharaja's government, and Major Brown was a British officer who headed the garrison in Gilgit town, and he revolted against the governor of Gilgit, Brigadier Ghansara Singh, who had been appointed by Maharaja, and took him prisoner and declared northern area, this Gilgit, as part of Pakistan. And he sent a message to Peshawar, which was the capital of Northwest Frontier Province. Gilgit Scouts were headquartered in NWFP. And Pakistan sent a political agent called Muhammad Alam, who reached Gilgit on 17th November, and Major Brown, 17th November 1947, and Major Brown handed over the territory to him. Now, there's something very interesting here. Muhammad Alam, incidentally, was a Tehsildar of Northwest Frontier Province. So, the whole thing about the indigenous struggle, there was no indigenous struggle. It was a British officer who led the revolt, and it's very strange that the representative of the colonial power leads the freedom struggle. It never happens. It didn't happen here. And this is the reason why Major Brown has titled his memoirs Revolt in, in Gilgit. It's a very apt description. Now, on 24th October, this is 3 weeks earlier, I mentioned the chronology that 20th October, the tribals had crossed into state of Jammu and Kashmir. On 24th October, Pakistan, declared formation of a provisional government of Azad Kashmir or POK. Now, this was 3 weeks before Major Brown handed over control of northern area to representative of NWFP, which was a province of Pakistan. The question arises, why did he not hand over, or why Pakistan did not hand over the territory to the provisional government of Azad Kashmir, which had come into being 3 weeks earlier? So Pakistan had absorbed 85% of the territory under its direct control right in the beginning, in November 47. This is 2 years before the so-called Karachi Agreement. Now, the second caveat to the official narrative, which has unfortunately been imbibed by all the international scholars and who merely talk about Karachi Agreement to show their deep research, which ignores some of the basic facts. The second caveat I mentioned, there were 3 signatories. The 2 signatories from the Kashmiri side was Sardar Ibrahim, POK president, and Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, the party chairman. Sardar Ibrahim, he was an intrepid politician. He became POK president in different intervals 4 times, right till the end of the millennium. In his later life, he kept saying, मैंने जिंदगी में और भी गलतियां की हैं, ये गलती नहीं की है. I have made other mistakes in my life, but I did not make this mistake. So he denied ever having signed the so-called Karachi Agreement, which suggests that the whole thing is a forgery. Now, the second signatory of the Karachi Agreement was the party chairman, Ghulam Abbas. Ghulam Abbas also distanced himself from this. And he said that, he was only the party chairman. Territorial secession is not part of the mandate or authority of the party chairman. And as party chairman, his task was only advocacy of the Kashmir cause. So he also distanced himself from the territorial secession of this huge chunk of territory, which was absorbed by Pakistan right in the beginning. So, Karachi Agreement, going by the, what the 2 Kashmiri signatories say, was probably a forged document. And in any case, this was a violation of the Security Council resolution. Now, let's come to the formation of the government. When the matter Kashmir issue was taken to the United Nations by India, it was India which took Kashmir issue to UN in January 1948, not Pakistan. Pakistan denied having anything to do with the invasion. They called it tribal invasion, and they said that in fact they were trying to to stop it, but the Pakistani forces were too weak, and so on and so forth. Now, the tribal invasion, was actually planned by a serving officer of Pakistan Army. chap called Colonel Akbar Khan. He was then the director of the Weapons Directorate, and he has left us an interesting account in his memoirs called Raiders in Kashmir. And again, the title is evocative. It tells you what it was. It was certainly not an indigenous struggle. Now, Akbar Khan has mentioned in his memoirs that there were at least 4 meetings chaired by Pakistan's then Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan, where the decision to launch the tribal invasion was taken. And why the tribal invasion? Because, Akbar Khan mentioned that Pakistan was afraid that a direct invasion by Pakistan army across the international border would provoke Indian army, and they were not willing to take on Indian army. This was this replay of what happened in Kargil in 1999. So the cabinet settled on this model where they used jihadis to launch the so-called tribal invasion. It was planned, led, and officered by Pakistan Army officers. Now, the second, Muhammad Sarraf, in his 2 volumes work, the Kashmiri's struggle for freedom, and Muhammad Sarraf, I'm quoting very difficult sources because he was by no means a friend of India. He has said that in these deliberations of the Pakistani cabinet, no Kashmiri leader was present, even though most of the senior leaders of Muslim Conference had crossed over to the Pakistani side by then. So again, what it shows you is that it was not an indigenous struggle. Now, Muhammad Sarraf has also left an account of how the provisional government was declared, and this is based on what he was told by Sardar Ibrahim, who became the first president of POK. Sardar Ibrahim said that he declared the provisional government on 24th October on the basis of 2 phone calls received the previous night, at midnight from Rawalpindi. One call was given by Khwaja Rahim, the commissioner of Rawalpindi division, and the second call came from Begum Naseem, the wife of this military adventurer, Colonel Akbar Khan, who was then leading the so-called, tribal invasion, and he had already entered J&K. Now again, it shows if the commissioner of Rawalpindi division and the then wife, they were later divorced and so on, the then wife of Colonel Saab, if they can decide on formation of the government, then it's again no indigenous struggle. Why did the calls come from Rawalpindi and not from Karachi? Karachi was the first capital of Pakistan. It remained the capital till about 1962. The calls came from Rawalpindi because Rawalpindi, then as now, was the general headquarters of Pakistan Army. And Pakistan Army has played a very major role in shaping Pakistan's Kashmir policy. Now, by this time, by January 48, the matter had been taken to the United Nations, and United Nations appointed a commission. It's called UN Commission on India and Pakistan, which was headed by a man called Korbel. He was the foreign minister of Czechoslovakia. And he later, became famous, or after his death, his daughter became famous. His daughter was Madeleine Albright, the US Secretary of State in the 90s. Now, this UNCIP, or UN Commission for India and Pakistan, adopted a resolution in August 48. The resolution had 3 parts. If we have time left, I'll show you the slide at the end. The first part was simply ceasefire. The second part was it called for withdrawal of all, mark my words, all Pakistani forces and forces under Pakistan's control from the territory occupied by them. And it's said that India to withdraw bulk of its forces. Now, there is a distinction here. Pakistan was asked to withdraw all its forces, while India was asked to withdraw only bulk of its forces. Some Indian forces were to remain to assist the government, the Maharaja's government. And, and then the part three was about holding the plebiscite to ascertain the will of the people. Now, given the sequence of the resolution, that is ceasefire, withdrawal of forces, and plebiscite at the end of it, it's very clear that plebiscite was holding a plebiscite was conditional upon prior performance by Pakistan of its obligation to withdraw all its forces, which Pakistan has not done till today. In fact, it has gone on to consolidate its hold, in violation of the UN Security Council resolution. So that made plebiscite impossible. But this part is in public domain, which you may have heard. Now, what I'll bring to you, and I have detailed it in my book. There's this general impression that India offered plebiscite or UN asked for plebiscite and then India dragged its feet. It was the other way around. There have been only 3 formal occasions when plebiscite was proposed. The first one was 2nd November 1947, when Mountbatten visited Lahore to hold talks with Jinnah. This was 1 week into the fighting. By that time, the Indian troops had been deployed, and the fate of the war, the balance had turned in India's favor. So Mountbatten told Jinnah that, basically Jinnah was trying to make a preemptive attempt to capture this territory. He said that attempt has failed, so your best hope is to have a plebiscite under UN's auspices. Exactly what became Pakistan's official position subsequently. Jinnah refused. Jinnah gave, of course, he was a lawyer, so he gave some procedural or technical argument. He said that let's not do it under UN's auspices, let's do it bilaterally between us. And Mountbatten had to decline it because Mountbatten said that he was only a constitutional head. Jinnah could do it, but he could not do it. Now, the substance is that Jinnah turned down the offer of plebiscite under UN's auspices, which was to become Pakistan's official position and remains its official position till today. Why the father of the nation turned down what has since become Pakistan's official position? Because Jinnah knew tribal invasion was still going on, and the tribals had looted, plundered, and raped Hindus, Muslims, and Christians alike without discrimination. There's this infamous story of the rape of nuns in a convent in Baramulla by the so-called tribals. So Jinnah knew that a vote under these circumstances will go against Pakistan. So he declined the offer. Now the second proposal was made in 1950 when UN appointed Owen Dixon, an Australian judge, as the mediator for India-Pakistan, and he came to the subcontinent and he proposed a regional plebiscite. His reason was, he said that a single plebiscite across the entire territory will leave pockets of minorities on either side of political divide. And this will lead to forced migration, which was actually happening on a much larger scale already. So he suggested that, let there be regional plebiscite, and he limited this to Delhi because he said in other areas, given the composition of the population, it was known which way the population wanted to go. The valley was a issue, area under contest because 70% of the population of the valley were Muslims, but the main political organization, National Conference, had opted for India. So now he suggested plebiscite in limited to Valley. Now Pakistan should have grabbed this offer, because if you go by Pakistan's logic, their logic is that Kashmir should belong to Pakistan because it's a Muslim majority area. The underlying premise being that the Muslims want to join Pakistan. Now, this advantage was most Pakistan's advantage, if Muslims actually wanted to join Pakistan, was most pronounced in case of the valley, where the 70% of population was Muslims. So Pakistan should have grabbed this offer. Pakistan rejected it, and it rejected it on the ground that a regional plebiscite will be a departure from the idea of a single plebiscite. Now, in the same paragraph, Owen Dixon has reported to the United Nations but I'm given the impression that Pakistan was willing to accept partition of the state provided it got the valley. Now, Pakistan, therefore, was willing to make a departure from the principle of single plebiscite, provided it got the valley, and it got the valley without a vote. So, the argument that regional plebiscite was a departure from single plebiscite and they are committed to single plebiscite was simply an excuse. Now, the third and the most telling episode comes in 1953. On 8th August 1953, Sheikh Abdullah was sacked and then arrested. Now, this, if you go by, there are many writers who claim that, India, the winds had started changing in Kashmir, and after the arrest of Sheikh Abdullah, who was supporting accession to India, obviously India had lost the Abdullah card. So Pakistan, proposed bilateral talks, again not plebiscite, bilateral talks. Prime Minister Bogra came to Delhi. Nehru-Bogra talks took place in the joint communique issued after the talks. Both agreed to plebiscite. Bogra went back. On 1st December 1953, he wrote a letter going back on the idea of plebiscite, which he had agreed in Delhi in a public document. And again, the same argument that regional plebiscite was a departure from the idea of single plebiscite. And as I have pointed out earlier, that this was simply a ruse, that Pakistan was willing to make a departure provided it got the valley by, partition, not by vote. Now, why was Pakistan again and again rejecting plebiscite, which was and remains its official position? For this, you have to look deeper into internal situation within POK. Owen Dixon came to this area in May 1950, a month before, in April 1950, Sardar Ibrahim, the first president of POK, was sacked by Pakistan government. Now, this was the beginning of what is called Sudan Revolt. Sudans were a martial race. The revolt spread to rest of the state. First Punjab Constabulary and then the Pakistan Army was deployed. And this began the first military operation against the Sudans, which lasted almost a decade. Next slide, please. Now, this is, in Sudan Revolt started in 50s, continued till late 50s. In 1955, Muslim Conference, which was the major political party in POK, gave a memorandum to Pakistan Constituent Assembly. And in this memorandum, Muslim Conference complained about the military operation by Pakistan Army against the people of POK and described it as great terror. Now, this memorandum was presented by Krishna Menon, India's foreign minister, to a session of the UN Security Council 2 years later in 57. Pakistani foreign minister, who was a very voluble person, he was present, but he did not demur, so obviously the facts were right. The UN circulated this document as a UN document. Now, just have a look what it says. For the past few years, people of Azad Kashmir in general and those of Punch have been subjected to great torture and terrorization. Ruthless and random firing by mortar guns took place, resulting in many deaths. Now, you see, mortar is a heavy caliber gun. There has not been a single instance of use of heavy caliber guns on the Indian side. The pellet firing, it was firing of pellets in 2011 or something. It was very unfortunate, but here Pakistan military was using heavy caliber guns against civilian population. Next slide. Now, again, this is from the same memorandum. Have been subjected to. No, next slide. Okay. No, sorry. Go back. Yes. These are the areas, villages in POK. Women have not only been raped, but in some cases, their breasts and secret parts have been bitten by the police and its officers. Teenage boys being subjected to unnatural vices by the men of Platoon 14 of the PC in Soon village and so on. Terrorized by the situation, 3,000 people have gone over to the Indian side of the ceasefire line. Now, this was a memorandum submitted by Muslim Conference to Pakistan Constituent Assembly, circulated as UN document, and then somebody, one can only guess who, decided to classify this. UN documents, by their very nature, are public documents. And once a document has been circulated in public domain, what is the point in classifying it? So the whole purpose was to basically shove it under the carpet to, avoid embarrassment to Pakistan, and it faded from public memory on both sides. I got a reference in a book by B.L. Sharma, who was one of the members of the Indian negotiating team in early years. And I got this document declassified by the UN, which is available now on the UN website. Now, Pakistan, while India had held elections in the Indian state of J&K in 1952 to elect a constituent assembly, and then elections were held again in 1957 to ratify the constitution, which had been worked out till by then. On Pakistani side, the whole territory was run on the basis of rules of business. Now, rules of business are basically a procedural device where it's for laying down the mandates of different government departments. So it's an executive procedure. So there was no democracy. Rules of business were being framed and implemented by Ministry of Kashmir Affairs of Pakistan government. POK politicians had no status. There's a famous story, and again, this is from the book by Muhammad Sarraf, who was a Muslim conference activist. He says that one of the POK presidents went to meet the joint secretary. It was in the Ministry of Kashmir Affairs, which basically POK was run by a joint secretary level officer. And this joint secretary told the POK president कि आप जरा बाहर बैठ जाइए, कराची से phone call आया that please go and sit in my PA's room because there's a telephone call coming from Karachi. Karachi was the capital. So this was the status of POK president, that he had to sit in the room of the PA of the joint secretary of the Ministry of Kashmir Affairs. I had mentioned earlier that the first POK president was Sardar Ibrahim, was arrested in 1950 itself. This Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, the Muslim Conference chairman, he was arrested and he was disqualified from taking part in elections in POK in 1964. Now, these were sham elections. Elections, as we understand the term, are based on universal franchise. Pakistan, under Ayub Khan, had a system of basic Democrats with a very limited franchise. Not even 1% of the population were eligible to vote. And the same system was enforced in POK. Even in that limited franchise election, the Muslim conference chairman was not allowed to participate. So this is how Pakistan has treated the Kashmiri leaders. Now, we don't have time, so I'm jumping stages. 1971 war, that changed the landscape and it demolished the two-nation theory, which was not only the basis of Pakistan's creation, it was also the basis of Pakistani claim on Kashmir, that, Kashmir is Muslim majority and therefore it should belong to Pakistan. And here the Muslim majority province, East Pakistan, had seceded from Pakistan. Now, 71 war was followed by three developments. Shimla Agreement of 1972. Pakistan got its third and current constitution in 1973, and POK was given its interim constitution in 1974. Now, in replying to debate in Pakistan National Assembly, the president of Pakistan, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who knew UN dynamics very well, he admitted that UN Security Council resolutions on Kashmir do not support Pakistan's case. And he explained this. He said the UN Security Council resolutions had asked Pakistan to withdraw all its forces, while India was asked to withdraw only bulk of its forces. So he exclaimed it was then and then that you lost the people the right of self-determination. Of course, he was a devious fellow, so he was distorting some facts. None of the Security Council resolutions have mentioned right of self-determination. It was plebiscite. But here, the president of Pakistan in Pakistan National Assembly was admitting that UN resolutions do not support Pakistan's case. And this was not a one-off statement. He repeated it 15 days later in Karachi. Now we come to the POK Interim Constitution Act of 1974. Next slide, please. Next slide after that. Okay. Now, under this POK Interim Constitution, there is a definition of state subject. This again has been in news, in the context of delimitation exercise which is going on in Jammu and Kashmir. The state subject is defined means a person for the time being residing in Azad Jammu and Kashmir or Pakistan who is a state subject as defined by late government of state of Jammu and Kashmir notification so and so as amended from time to time. So there are three caveats. The first is for the time being. That is, it means that, the population of the area is in a flux, that people can come from outside and stay or live in POK and would be considered state subject. The second one is residing in Azad Jammu and Kashmir or Pakistan. So even if you are not residing in POK, you are simply residing in Pakistan, still you can be deemed as a state subject under POK's interim constitution. And third is state subject as defined in notification of 1927 as amended from time to time. Now this is a reference to a notification of Maharaja's government in 1927, which had basically, the notification reflected the theory son of the soil, which is there in, many parts of the world, in Indian states also. So this was, they said that those who were living in this state on such and such date, they will be deemed as the state subjects. And this was amended once only. Now, from time to time, again phrase ambiguity, who amended it again, and what was that amendment? So these three major caveats basically nullifies the distinction between the POK subjects and the citizens of Pakistan. So Pakistan has managed to change the demographic composition of this territory right from the beginning, which renders plebiscite irrelevant. Now, interestingly, this is POK interim constitution. 2 years before POK interim constitution was adopted, Pakistan Citizenship Act of 1951 was extended to cover both POK and Gilgit Baltistan. What is the significance? It means that the people of POK became citizens of Pakistan not by their will, but by an act adopted by Pakistani National Assembly or Pakistani Parliament. So if they have already become citizens of Pakistan, then where is the need or justification for plebiscite? And this was done even before the POK constitution had been adopted. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. This is, no, go back. Okay. This is a interesting, again, one of the many interesting articles. This says no person or political party in Azad Jammu and Kashmir shall be permitted to propagate against or take part in activities prejudicial or detrimental to the ideology of the state's accession to Pakistan. So this leaves only one option to for people of POK, that is accession to Pakistan. They don't have the choice of remaining independent. They don't have the choice for joining India. And if the choice is limited to only one option, again, there's no, what is the point of plebiscite? Now, there are other very interesting provisions. I don't have time to show all of them. You know, POK constitution does not define who's a Kashmiri. It defines who's a Muslim. And the definition is restrictive, which rules out Ahmadiyyas as Muslims. So Sir Zafrullah Khan, Pakistan's first foreign minister, who argued Pakistan's case on Kashmir in the Security Council, if he were alive, he would have been considered a non-Muslim in POK. Now, the most interesting part of the POK constitution, this is Article 31. There are three articles, Article 31, Article 33, and Article 56. Article 31 lays down the division of powers between the elected assembly and POK council. What is POK council? This was a body created by Pakistan to perpetuate its role and its rule within POK. POK council is called Kashmir Council, is headed by Pakistan's Prime Minister, and the majority of the members were Pakistanis. So this was ruled by the proxy. They had created an elected assembly, but under Article 31 of the POK constitution, all the legislative and executive powers were vested in the council headed by Pakistani Prime Minister. And that article said the elected assembly will exercise residual powers. Now, those residual powers have never been defined. The powers of the Kashmir Council headed by Pakistan are defined in third schedule of the POK constitution. So this was called rule by proxy, which was much criticized. Now, the second very important article is Article 56. And Article 56 said that regardless of whatever is contained in this constitution, Pakistan government can do whatever it likes. And, I'm not quoting the exact words, but this was the thrust. And this article has been used by Pakistan to dismiss the elected governments and the elected assembly. So it was used by General Zia to dismiss the elected president of POK in 1977. What is the importance of military dictator dismissing POK president? He had even arrested and hanged Pakistan's prime minister, elected prime minister. The significance lies in the fact is that General Zia did not have to break any rule of the Pakistani constitution or POK constitution, because that Pakistan's control over POK has been built into POK constitution. And the most potent rule is Article 56, which gives Pakistan untrammeled powers to do as it pleases in POK. And Zia was not the only one who exercised these powers. 2 decades later, Nawaz Sharif, as Pakistan's Prime Minister, again used this Article 56 to dismiss an elected government of POK. The third very important article is Article 33. And Article 33 defines the amendment procedures. Now, what is the significance of amendment procedures? Amendment procedure was meant to ensure that this compact of powers which Pakistan had devised, which gave it, complete powers, under Article 31, legislative and executive powers in POK, under Article 56, powers to dismiss POK government and assembly. To protect these two articles from any amendment by POK assembly, Article 33 said that these three articles, 31, 33 itself, and 56, cannot be amended without Pakistan's approval. So by making any amendment to these three articles subject to Pakistani approval, Pakistan has given itself a veto and ensured its control over POK in perpetuity. This is much like, the Security Council. The 5 permanent members have, right from the beginning, they built in a veto power over any amendment procedure to ensure the dominance of the Security Council in perpetuity. Pakistan did the same thing with POK constitution. Now, this was much criticized now, almost 4 decades later, in 2018. The Kashmir Council was relegated to advisory role, but its powers were not transferred to elected assembly. Powers of the legislative powers of the Kashmir Council have now been assumed directly by Pakistan. So Pakistan now sits at the heart of the constitutional compact of POK and exercises powers from within. And unlike, any democratic system where there is separation of legislative and executive powers, in this case, Pakistan exercises both. Now, this far-reaching change, we all know that Pakistan, largely being a military, and certainly military has controlled POK right from the beginning, exercised absolute control over this territory. But here, Pakistan has virtually written it in stone. So they have, publicly assumed those powers. Now, let's go back to Gilgit Baltistan, which I mentioned right in the beginning, northern areas, which was 85% of the territory occupied by Pakistan. Gilgit Baltistan has been meted out even harsher treatment than POK. So while POK got a so-called constitution in 1974, Gilgit Baltistan or northern areas were directly ruled by Ministry of Kashmir Affairs in Rawalpindi. I mentioned earlier the court judgment of POK High Court in 1993, where it described secession of northern areas as a violation of Security Council resolutions. So though this order itself was suppressed, Pakistan government, out of embarrassment and domestic political reasons, because the people of POK were very worked up, they created a council. And this was not an elected council. It took another 15 years almost before elected council was established in 2009. Now, this elected council were given some limited powers under Zardari. President Zardari was a Shia. Gilgit Baltistan is the only Shia majority territory under Pakistan's control, so he was sympathetic. And he is allowed some limited legislative powers to Gilgit Baltistan Council under Gilgit Baltistan Order of 2009. Now, this order was abolished in 2018 under Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2018. It abolished the entire list of 61 subjects on which the elected assembly had been given limited legislative powers in 2009. So there were huge protests, and the copy of the Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2018 was torn in the presence of Pakistani Prime Minister Shah Khaqan Abbasi. He was acting Prime Minister after Nawaz Sharif's fall. And people and the assembly, because they were under military control, they had no recourse but to go to the court to the Supreme Judicial Court of Gilgit-Baltistan. And the Supreme Judicial Court, in a very courageous decision, set aside the Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2018. Now Pakistan government went to an appeal to Pakistan Supreme Court, and Pakistan Supreme Court sided with Islamabad against the people of Gilgit-Baltistan and has restored the same order, Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2018, against which people of the territory were protesting. So this is, this tells you how much azadi people of this region has. Now, these two developments which I have mentioned, that is 13th Amendment of POK's interim constitution and Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2018, both took place in 2018, 1 year before the deletion of Article 370. Deletion of Article 370 attracted attention, and it was criticized by, many people. Obviously, they had an agenda, but this huge change which Pakistan had made, both in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan, went unnoticed. I have in my book quoted from the Constitution of POK. I have quoted from the 13th Amendment of POK Constitution, and I have quoted from the Gilgit-Baltistan Orders of 2009 and 2018. These are all government documents. These are not primary sources, and they show that people of the territory have neither azadi nor autonomy. Now, let me quickly turn on the economics part. In 1967, Mangla Dam was constructed. Mangla Dam is constructed on Jhelum River, and it is located in POK. Now, this was 6 years before Pakistan got its third and current constitution in 1973. Now, why I'm mentioning this, I'll come to that in a minute. For 36 years after Mangla Dam was constructed, POK was neither paid anything, was not given any compensation or payment for its water or electricity. When the payments started in 2003, 36 years later, they were only paid water usage charges, which are very nominal. They were not paid hydropower royalty for production of electricity, hydropower. And this was justified on the ground. Pakistani provinces like Punjab and Northwest Frontier Province, they are paid hydropower royalty. And there's a huge difference between water usage charge. If the amount was the same, difference in terminology or classification did not matter. But water usage charge is 15 paisa per unit, and hydropower royalty is 1 rupee 10 paisa per unit. So people of POK are being paid, still being paid the same rate, 1/7 for the same molecule of water, which the people of Pakistani provinces are paid. So this is a way Pakistan treats Muslims of Kashmir, who are treated as lesser mortals than Muslims of Pakistan. Now, there have been protests from time to time, and of course, there was a huge migration issue because the construction of the hydropower, the dam led to displacement of people, and most of the so-called Mirpuris who are based in London, they are actually people who are displaced by this dam. Now, this discrimination is justified on the ground. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. Article 161 of the Pakistan's constitution, it says that, this is in layman's term, the hydropower royalty is called net hydel profits, NHP, that this can only be paid to provinces of Pakistan. And Pakistani government's claim is that Azad Kashmir is not a province of Pakistan, and being the dutiful, law-abiding citizen of the world, Pakistan has kept this territory separate, awaiting plebiscite. So, because it's not part of Pakistan, and Pakistani constitution limits such payments only to Pakistani provinces, so it cannot be paid. Now, this is a very strange logic, because the distinct status of POK did not come in the way of using its resources. This was raised only when it came to making payments for its resources. Now, the second point is that if there was any, weight in this logic, why could not this have been built into this Pakistani constitution from the beginning? Because by then, Mangla Dam was already in existence for 6 years. And the third is that, since then, there have been 26 amendments of Pakistani constitution. Nearly everything has changed except this. So obviously, this is not an omission, but a conscious decision. Now, let me touch briefly also on, I'll have to now come to a close, on the elections in POK, which are basically, they started in after 74 interim constitution came into being, and the first assembly elected was persuaded between inverted commas by General Ziaul Haq after his military coup of 77 to dissolve itself. Have you ever heard of any politician or elected assembly committing harakiri by dissolving itself? Now, since then, there have been periodic elections. The current president of POK, Barrister Sultan Mahmood, he himself in one of the elections, he was then prime minister, and he lost power, and he alleged massive rigging. This was in the 90s. Now, the strange thing about the about the elections in POK and Gilgit Baltistan is that they always bring to power the party which is in power in Islamabad. Now, this happy coincidence has been arranged by, it's called, the term for it, they have created an electoral college where 40% of the seats, the refugee seats, are in Pakistan, and they are in the gift of Pakistan, chief minister of that province of Pakistan government, who can, influence the results. So you had such strange result that in last elections, 2 candidates for POK assembly were elected from Karachi. And who are these candidates? They belong to MQM, which is the Muhajir party. So Muhajir party electing Kashmiris for POK. This is the result of, the kind of electoral college they have created. And most of the constituencies are very tiny, they're voting tally, 700 votes for this candidate and 800 votes for that, a constituency for 1,500 voters or 2,000 voters, they can be easily manipulated. Let me touch one more aspect, and that is CPEC. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor enters Pakistan through POK, or specifically through Gilgit-Baltistan. China has committed about $16 billion in credit, mostly credit, there's very little investment under CPEC in Pakistan. Total amount is 23 billion, out of which they have signed agreements for 16 billion for projects in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. So almost 2/3 of the money under CPEC is going into this area. And of that 16 billion, only 5 billion goes to POK, 12 billion, sorry, only 4 billion goes to POK, 4 or 5, 12 billion has been committed to Gilgit Baltistan for a major project called Bhasha Dam, which is yet to be constructed, but MOU has been signed. And this will lead to ecological changes. It will lead to ethnic changes in an area where there is a very thin Shia majority. In contrast to this, Gwadar has got only $900 million of Chinese credit or investment. So though Gwadar attracts more attention in the media, it's really Gilgit-Baltistan where most of the Chinese presence is going. And why? The reason is very simple if you look at the map. And the reason is that this is the most strategically important area where they are trying to catch India in a pincer movement. They are already sitting in, they had occupied Aksai Chin in 50s. They are now in eastern Ladakh, and Gilgit-Baltistan is on the western side. So that is where China is strengthening its presence. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we'll just start the question and answer session. So thank you for the thought-provoking ideas, sir. Now, we can go for it. And please keep your questions brief and precise so that we can cover as many as possible. And you can ask questions either by raising your hand or writing in the chat box. Thank you.
I must say that I have to leave. I have another speaking engagement. So please keep your questions very brief. I'll be happy to answer them.
Yes, sir. Any question from online audience? Or else we can then go to the classroom. No questions in the chat box. Let me check. Yeah, so we can, Venkat sir, you want to say something?
Yeah, Raj, I think before questions do come in, and I'm sure that there'll be plenty of them. First and foremost, sir, I want to really congratulate you and thank you for the painstaking research that you have actually done, including by looking at sources that are original and from across the boundary, and especially those Pakistani sources that you've quoted, which will be of immense use for our students. My question, sir, and again to keep it very short, is this not time for us to now launch a serious diplomatic offensive in order to highlight some of the manner of ill treatment that the Pakistanis have indulged in both the Pakistan occupied Kashmir as well as Gilgit-Baltistan? We have that legal document called the Instrument of Accession through which the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir has acceded to India. Pakistan, as you have rightly pointed out, has not fulfilled its commitments as identified by the UN resolutions. It continues to use this particular area as launch pads for infiltrators and cross-border terrorism. So we have got an excellent platform by which we can actually push, particularly diplomatically. So in that sense, is there a case for us to use the UN as a platform, particularly after Pakistan was cornered on the FATF? Your thoughts on this?
Well, let me mention, you see, there are two aspects. One is the accession issue. It's worth bringing out what I pointed out, that was Pakistan, not India, which went back on plebiscite, and it did so because of the military operation. I've written an article which was carried by Hindustan Times, why Pakistan rejected plebiscite. This was on the second anniversary of deletion of Article 370. So I'll leave it at that. I'll explain the background. The second aspect is the political and economic exploitation of people of POK and Gilgit Baltistan by Pakistan, aren't they Muslims? Or they are lesser Muslims than the people of Pakistan? Now, this is something which needs to be brought out. The most stark example is that for the same molecule of water, they are paid 1/7 the amount which is paid to Pakistani provinces. And they have built-in Pakistani control in POK constitution. So these are things which need to be highlighted, but in what manner and where, I will hesitate to make any suggestion because I'm a retired person. So this is something which the government of India has to decide.
Yeah, any questions? No. Okay, so Dr. Anmol, can we start from the classroom if any question is there? Any question from the classroom?
Yeah, I think then.
Hello. Good morning, sir. Myself first, sir. As you mentioned that Pakistan's constitution does not uh, define who is a Kashmiri and who is a Muslim. So, do you think the atrocities committed in this region, can there be some actions that can be taken to counter? Because whenever something happens with the Muslims in India, Pakistan vehemently opposes that we are not protecting our minorities. But when it comes to Baltistan and POK, we are seeing a very completely different narrative. So what can be some mechanisms for protecting their rights as well?
Yes, you are right. These are things which need to be brought out. And I have, I think, given enough material in my book. So I'll leave it at that. This is a completely discriminatory treatment. And as I said that human rights are universal. So thank you. Let me take your leave because I have to rush for another speaking engagement on the other end of the town.
I think, Deepak, can you just quickly ask one last question and then we will end the session?
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, sir, good morning. I'm Deepak Srinivasa, political public administration research scholar. My question to sir is, what kind of political leadership would you like to see on the way forward dealing with India-Pakistan relationship? Thank you.
This is it goes beyond the remit of my lecture. The political leadership that is decided in India, we are a democracy, is decided by elections. So, and let me just end by quoting my late boss. I was privileged to work under Mr. Jain Dikshit. He was our High Commissioner, later Foreign Secretary, and later he became NSA. He used to caution that don't look at India, that Pakistan issue through the spectrum of Kashmir. He said that, the fate of 1 billion people of the subcontinent cannot be held hostage by, this territory which has barely 15 million people. So I think that has to be kept in mind in deciding whatever we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to draw the attention of the people here about the 5-day certificate training program on strategic negotiations in crisis situation, which is being organized by our school. And it is from 19th to 23rd December 2022. So you guys can also participate in it if you wish. So like key former ambassadors like Talmiz Ahmed, Sanjay Singh, Rakesh Sood, Navto Sharma, Sarna, TCA Raghavan are there. So like we will be having with that. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for being present here and then guiding us. And thank you so much, other participants as well. Other schools like Sismis who enable their students to join the lecture. Registrar office who was always also there in the talk. Vice Chancellor sir who always motivate us to organize such kind of events, and our director sir. Al Venkateshwar sir, who's always keen to organize such kind of lectures for the benefit of the student community. And thank you so much, all the participants who joined from the different parts. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and my apologies. The speaker had to rush, so we'll obviously we'll continue with these conversations in the future also. Thank you, and I wish everyone a very good day. Thank you.